Naaman, Naaman, Naaman. Naaman illustrates for us today an issue that I think is pretty important. We talk a lot about faith in church, as we should. It's a central part of who we are. Faith, as the 11th chapter of Hebrews reminds us, faith is the conviction of things unseen. Right? And faith is a good thing. Right? It encourages us to take chances, to take risks, to do things that we might not normally do. But faith is something that also tends to endure. It goes up and down. Sometimes we feel like our faith is very low. Sometimes we feel like it's on a mountaintop, and usually it's somewhere in between. But faith is that thing that very often, as we talk about it in church, and we talk about it in its religious connotations, faith is one of those things that we can, for the most part, count on. We know what it is. But I think Naaman, in this first lesson today, points us to something far more challenging in our world today, and that's trust. Trust and faith, if you look them up in the dictionary, are in very much the same things, a very similar kind of definition. Except I want to suggest to you today that trust is far more fragile, and as a result, needs a lot more care. It needs a lot more attention. And especially these days, because trust, individually and as a community, I would suggest, is in real trouble. Let me tell you what I mean. Trust is something that's earned and given, right? Very often we expect people to earn it, right? You've got to do something to make sure that I trust you. But it's also given. And that, I would suggest, is our big problem in our American culture today. Oh yeah, we want it. We want people to trust us. And we want to be able to trust institutions, entities, whatever it might be. But we're slower and slower to give it as we might have been in the past. Naaman, you see, illustrates that for us. Naaman says, they told me to go bathe in a river. Oh, we got rivers here. What's that going to do? The king of Israel, trust, big issue, right? Who's this writing to me? What does he want from me? In both cases, these two were really lacking the ability to first trust not just each other, but God. And then eventually, really trust anybody. I want to ask you a question, actually a couple of questions, and I hope you'll be honest. Raise your hand if at some point in the last week or so, you've been driving and something happened and you said to yourself, I'm glad I'm a better driver than that guy. Anybody? Yeah. It's always that guy, right? Or how about this one? I am personally guilty of this one. Have you been recently behind somebody in the grocery store in that 10 or less aisle? And you're looking around the person, counting in their basket, right? And if they've got 11, you can just feel it rising in you, right? We forget that the person behind us in that line is also counting. So we want people to trust us, but we struggle to give it. Here's some other examples. We live in a culture right now, right, where if somebody or something does one thing wrong, oh, can't trust them. If a company has a data breach, for instance, and emails are lost, oh, you can't trust them. Might not have been any fault of their own. If a teacher asks or acts inappropriately, say, with a student, could be 1 in 10,000, but, oh, can't trust teachers. See what happens? If a police officer makes a terrible decision, either on purpose or by accident, and someone is killed, we say, oh, can't trust the cops. Right? You know where I'm going? We see members of Congress, right, on TV, and whether we agree with them or not, right, if they say something we don't agree with, oh, can't trust them. That's really dangerous. Really dangerous. Because trust is the lifeblood of every community. It's the lifeblood of every relationship. Trust is like glass. It looks pretty until you break it. And then you can't put it back together again. It does take effort to build it. And sadly, it takes a lot less effort to break it. But we're living in a culture now where more than ever, we need people like church folks. We need people who pause, who reflect, who talk about faith and trust all the time. Faith and trust are a matter of who we are. It's our lifeblood too. Because we can't worship, we can't really be people of faith without trusting that what God says, God will do. It's called the covenant. And we are bound together through the promises of baptism, through the sacrament of communion, from the cross. We are bound together to give each other a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt than we might in other situations. Because we have a unique relationship here. But we mustn't forget that the people who we meet when we leave this building are also children of God. And we are called to do our best to give them the benefit of the doubt. To look at them and not make the same mistakes or the same assumptions that we see throughout the rest of our culture. And we have to own up to being part of the problem first. You know, a recent study came out that said the reason why, and this is typically true, I would say, of national and especially internet news, the reason why it's negative a lot of times, and we say, oh, the news is so negative. Do you know why? Because we want it to be. Because when pollsters call and ask, hey, I'd like you to answer some questions about, how you consume your news, in the secret of our homes, in the anonymity of that poll, more of us than not say, yeah, we're kind of drawn to the negative stuff. And what does that do? It reinforces our distrust. People get down on the media a lot, unfairly, because they're part of this too. Just because you have a bad story doesn't mean you don't trust any of it. It's crazy. They're caught up in all of this too. But here's some suggestions about trust. The first, never read social media comments. Ever. Never, ever, ever read the comments. Why? Because that's where distrust is. That's the manure in which distrust grows. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Reddit, all of it. There's nothing wrong with it on the face of it. But you got to be smart, right? A hammer, I was just saying downstairs, a hammer is great if you want to pound a nail. But if you want to whack somebody on the head with it, not the appropriate use. But more than that, be a person as best you can who leads with trust. Be a person who leads with your best foot forward. That when the person in front of you in the grocery store line has 13 items in the 10, maybe you could pause and say, you know what? There might be someone who's, an ill parent in the car, and they're in a hurry. And this is the best way that they can get through. Maybe you can lead with the idea when you're watching the news, right? To say, you know what? How can I find in any story, good or bad, how can I find something to celebrate? How can I find something that's good? Because there is lots of good if we look. If we lead with trust as opposed to, oh, it's all bad. Because it's not. This thing, trust, is probably the most important thing that we have in a community, and it's also the most fragile. But we can hold it together by seeing each other as we've been created, seeing each other as children of God, seeing each other as equally standing at the foot of the cross, needing forgiveness. As Paul says, all fall short of the glory of God. As seeing one another as not out to get me. Oh, he ran that red light just to get me. No. Maybe it was just a mistake. Anyone make a mistake ever? Anybody? I believe this really is, maybe not life and death, but pretty close for our culture right now. And as people of faith, as people of trust, let's not make the mistake that Naaman made. To immediately think something's up, something's happening, somebody's trying to get me, somebody's trying to trick me. We're far too cynical these days. There is good. Look for it. Find it. Celebrate it. Reinforce it. But more than anything, lead with trust. Lead with the belief as it comes directly from God. As God is in covenant with us, we are in covenant with each other. And as a result, we've got to do our level best to put good into the system and not only take good out. So, I know you can do it. This week, be very careful how you consume online media. And you all do at some level. Be very careful how you do that. But even when you see that, know we are people of good faith, of good trust. And if we lead with it, we can really change what's happening in our world. Amen.